Welcome to History Zettel. If you are new here, this channel investigates the forgotten operations, unsolved mysteries, and buried evidence of the Second World War. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next case. On the 2nd of May, 1945, Soviet troops of the 5th Shock Army stormed the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. What they found in the bunker beneath would spark one of history's most perplexing forensic investigations. A sofa with bloodstains, a bed frame marked with dry blood, and a series of medical anomalies that would challenge everything witnesses claimed about Adolf Hitler's final moments. The Fuhrerbunker had been captured intact. While fierce fighting still raged around the Reichstag building, Smersh, the Soviet military counterintelligence unit whose name meant death to spies, moved into the underground complex with a singular mission assigned by Stalin himself: find Hitler, dead or alive. But what Lieutenant General Alexander Vadis and his forensic team discovered would not bring clarity. Instead, it would deepen one of the 20th century's greatest mysteries. The first Western observers to enter the bunker were British and American intelligence officers who bribed Soviet guards with cigarettes in July 1945. Colonel John McAdam of British military intelligence made 2 separate visits, carefully documenting what he saw. Life magazine photographers followed shortly after, capturing images of a scene already degraded by time, water damage, and looting. What struck these early investigators was not what they found, but what was conspicuously absent. Hitler's sitting room, where he allegedly shot himself on the 30th of April, contained a sofa positioned against the concrete wall. McAdam noted bloodstains on the right armrest when facing the sofa. The stain had trickled down to the sofa's wooden frame, forming a small dry pool. But when he examined the wall behind the sofa, he found nothing. No blood spatter, no tissue fragments, no evidence whatsoever of a close-range gunshot wound to the head. This absence troubled the British intelligence officer considerably. A semi-automatic pistol fired at the right temple, as numerous witnesses had described, would have produced catastrophic exit wound trauma. Brain matter and blood would have sprayed across the wall in an unmistakable pattern. Forensic investigators in 1945 understood this fundamental principle of ballistics. Yet the concrete wall showed nothing but mold and water stains. The floor beneath the sofa presented another puzzle. In the standing water that covered much of the lower bunker, investigators found traces of blood directly under the sofa's right arm. When Soviet pathologists later examined these stains more carefully, they noted something peculiar. The blood had pooled in 2 separate locations with clearly defined edges. This indicated a slow, steady drip rather than the violent spray pattern associated with arterial damage from a gunshot wound. Some forensic experts who later reviewed the evidence suggested the blood pattern was more consistent with a severed artery in the wrist or forearm. A wound that would bleed heavily but not explosively. A wound that might result from a suicide attempt using a blade rather than a bullet. But this theory contradicted every witness statement about Hitler's death. In Hitler's bedroom, adjacent to his sitting room, investigators found more disturbing evidence. A simple wooden bed frame with no mattress. The mattress had been removed by Smersh during their initial search in May. But on the wooden side panel of the bed, another bloodstain remained visible. This blood had also trickled down from where the mattress had rested, forming dark streaks on the frame. The mattress itself had vanished into Soviet custody, never to be photographed or properly documented. But both British and American observers independently noted the blood on the bed frame before the Soviets sealed the bunker. This raised an uncomfortable question. Had someone died in Hitler's bed? And if so, who? When Smersh pathologists conducted blood typing tests on samples taken from both the sofa and the bed frame on the 14th of May, 1946, they discovered both samples matched blood type A sub 2. Adolf Hitler's documented blood type, according to his personal physician, Dr. Theodore Morell's records from January 1940, was type A. Close, but the A sub 2 classification added a layer of specificity that would later prove important. The problem was that blood type A was fairly common in the German population. Finding blood type A in Hitler's quarters proved very little by itself. What mattered was the location and pattern of the stains, which told a story that contradicted the established narrative. Every witness who survived the bunker's final days told essentially the same story. On the afternoon of the 30th of April, 1945, Hitler had retreated to his sitting room with his wife Eva, whom he had married the previous day. His valet, SS Lieutenant Colonel Heinz Linge, his adjutant, and several bodyguards waited outside. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, they heard a single gunshot. After waiting several minutes, they entered to find Hitler slumped on the right side of the sofa, with a bullet wound to his right temple and a Walther pistol lying on the floor. Eva sat beside him, dead from cyanide poisoning, smelling of bitter almonds. This account came from multiple sources: Linge, SS Major Otto Gunsche, Chief Driver Erich Kempke, Hitler Youth Leader Arthur Axmann, and others. Their testimonies aligned remarkably well, which is precisely what made the forensic evidence so troubling. If Hitler had shot himself in the right temple while sitting on the sofa, where was the exit wound evidence on the wall? Where was the massive blood loss that would have resulted? The Soviet investigators became increasingly suspicious of Heinz Linge. During brutal interrogation sessions lasting 8 or 9 hours, Linge's story began to show cracks. In one session, he described the wound as being on the left side of Hitler's head. In another, he corrected himself to say it was on the right temple. When pressed for details about the wound itself, he became vague and evasive. Most damning was what Linge told his cellmate, actually an NKVD plant recording their conversations. They asked me again about the bullet hole and whether there were any traces of blood on the clothes, Linge confided. I replied I had noticed a patch of blood on the right temple, a red dot not exceeding the size of 3 postage stamps. I don't know whether it was in reality a bullet hole. This stain could also have been painted on. The implications of this statement were staggering. Was Linge suggesting the wound had been faked? And if so, by whom and for what purpose? The Smersh investigators found other anomalies in the bunker. Hitler's conference room, where he had held his final desperate military briefings, showed signs of a hasty fire. Papers had been burned, furniture overturned, but no blood. Hitler's bathroom, his secretary's rooms, the map room where he had raged about phantom armies that could not relieve Berlin, all clean of any evidence of violence. The only blood in the entire Fuhrerbunker complex was in 2 locations: the sofa in the sitting room and the bed frame in Hitler's bedroom. 2 locations, 2 different pieces of furniture, the same blood type, but a pattern of bleeding inconsistent with the witnessed manner of death. The bodies themselves presented even more disturbing questions. On the 5th of May, 1945, Smersh discovered 2 badly burned corpses buried in a shallow crater just outside the bunker's emergency exit. Witnesses had said this was where Hitler and Eva had been cremated and buried. The bodies were severely damaged by fire, but not completely destroyed. Forensic pathologists transported them to Berlin Buch Hospital for detailed autopsy. The male corpse showed no evidence of a gunshot wound to the head. None. Soviet pathologists examined the skull carefully, searching for bullet entry or exit wounds. They found nothing. The top portion of the occipital bone at the back of the skull was missing, burned away. But no bullet holes in the temples, no holes in the palate suggesting a shot through the mouth. No forensic evidence of the death described by witnesses. A cyanide capsule had been found crushed in the corpse's mouth. But when pathologists tested the brain, lungs, liver, and intestines for cyanide compounds, they found nothing. The poison was only in the mouth. This indicated the capsule had been crushed after death, not during. A dead person cannot breathe in cyanide fumes or swallow the poison for it to reach internal organs. The dental bridge work in the corpse's mouth matched Hitler's known dental work. This was confirmed by Hitler's dental technician Fritz Echtmann and dental assistant Keith Heusermann, both of whom were captured and brutally interrogated by the NKVD. They recognized Hitler's distinctive gold bridges, including one that had been sawed through and repaired in October 1944 when Hitler developed an abscess. But here emerged another problem. The Soviets claimed the bridges were still attached to portions of jawbone when found. Heusermann later stated she was only shown the bridges themselves, loose and separated from any bone. If the bridges were loose in the corpse's mouth, they could have been placed there. The real Hitler's dental work removed from his actual body and inserted into a substitute corpse. The female body presented even more serious anomalies. Shrapnel wounds in the chest that had caused hemorrhaging around the heart. Hemorrhaging only occurs when the person is alive. This woman had been struck by artillery shrapnel while still breathing. She had bled into her chest cavity from penetrating wounds, but not one witness ever mentioned Eva Braun being wounded by shrapnel before her death. Her dental bridge, identified as one made for Eva Braun, but never fitted according to Dr. Hugo Bloschke and Kata Heusermann, was found loose in the mouth. Like the male corpse, a cyanide capsule had been crushed in her mouth, but no cyanide compounds detected in internal organs. The pattern was identical. Bodies dressed up to appear to be Hitler and Eva. Dental bridges inserted. Cyanide capsules crushed in mouths. Post-mortem. On the 14th of May, 1946, frustrated by contradictory evidence, the NKVD returned to the bunker to conduct forensic reconstruction. They brought Heinz Linge from his Moscow prison cell back to Berlin. In the dank, moldy sitting room, they ordered him to recreate exactly how the furniture had been positioned on the 30th of April. NKVD scientists measured everything precisely. They took scrapings from the wall behind the sofa, searching for microscopic blood spatter. They found none. They examined the sofa again, cutting away fabric samples, measuring the dried blood pools. The amount of blood was minimal, far too little for a fatal head wound, more consistent with a cut or puncture wound that bled slowly. The blood on Hitler's bed frame haunted investigators. Why would there be blood on Hitler's bed if he died on the sofa? Some theorized Hitler had been shot while lying in bed, then moved to the sofa to stage the scene. Others suggested someone else entirely had died in the bed. But who? And why would such an elaborate deception be necessary? Stalin himself followed the investigation obsessively. He received daily updates via secure telephone line from NKVD general assigned to oversee the interrogations. Stalin seemed convinced Hitler had escaped. When Marshal Zhukov tried to visit the Fuhrerbunker on the 2nd of May, Smersh turned him away. When he tried again 2 days later, they refused him again. Even the front commander could not access the site while Smersh conducted its investigation. The contradictions piled up like bodies in a Berlin street. Blood on furniture that didn't match the witness accounts. Burned corpses with the right dental work but wrong causes of death. Cyanide capsules in mouths but no cyanide in organs. A missing gunshot wound. A missing mattress. Missing pieces of skull that would later be found and then proven by DNA testing in 2009 to belong to a woman under 40 years old. The final NKVD report, completed on the 19th of January 1946 and codenamed Operation Myth, concluded that the forensic evidence suggested fraud. The bodies found in the Reich Chancellery Garden showed signs of having been staged. The witnesses were either lying or had been deceived themselves. The real Adolf Hitler's body had never been found. Some researchers have theorized that Hitler's loyal bodyguards, led by SS General Hans Rattenhuber, conducted their own forensic deception. In the 31 hours between Hitler's death and the Soviet capture of the bunker, they could have substituted bodies. They could have cremated the real Hitler and Eva elsewhere, burying them in one of the countless mass graves surrounding the Reich Chancellery. They could have planted substitute corpses with the real dental bridges to fool the Soviets. This theory explains the shrapnel wounds on the female corpse, a genuine casualty from the battle, possibly taken from one of the overwhelmed field hospitals. It explains the cyanide capsules crushed in dead mouths. It explains the dental bridges found loose rather than properly fitted. It explains why the blood in the bunker doesn't match the witnessed manner of death, but it raises more questions than it answers. If such a fraud was perpetrated, only a handful of Hitler's innermost circle would have known. Linge, Rattenhuber, perhaps Hitler's adjutant Gunsche, perhaps Martin Bormann, who escaped the bunker during the breakout on the 1st of May, and whose body was not definitively identified until 1972. The blood on the sofa remains. The blood on the bed frame remains in the historical record. The contradictions remain unresolved. 3 separate Soviet investigations produced 3 different conclusions, all classified and hidden from the West until 1968. And in 1970, the KGB exhumed whatever bodies they had stored in Magdeburg and incinerated them completely, scattering the ashes in the Biederitz River. The Fuhrerbunker's forensic mysteries died with the witnesses who knew the truth, somewhere beneath the parking lots and apartment buildings of modern Berlin, or scattered in a river, or lost in the chaos of May 1945. The truth remains buried. The forensic mysteries of the Fuhrerbunker remain unsolved, preserved only in declassified autopsy reports, contradictory testimonies, and the lingering question, whose blood marked that sofa? Thank you for watching. If this investigation gave you something to think about, please comment, like, and share. Subscribe to History Zettel and join us for the next one. The file is never truly closed.